This is the Anvil Aerospace Super Hornet Mark II, the replacement for the venerable Mark I Super Hornet, a sleek new design that takes cues from its older sisters, the F7A and F7C, with a new updated hull and cockpit design. But despite the new great look, the Super Hornet has some design issues that in some instances baffle me and in others aggravate me to no end. Welcome pilots, my name is Hybrid V, and today we're going to be taking a peek under the canopy of the new Super Hornet to see if it's worth your hard-earned money. Before we start, this video is sponsored by eyeweartech's Beam Eye Tracker, a clever piece of software that turns your webcam or smartphone into a head tracker that you can use in Star Citizen, DCS, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and much more. The Beam Eye Tracker is a much more affordable alternative to expensive hardware head trackers that can further increase your immersion in your favorite sims. If you want to learn more, check out the links in the description below, along with a link to my review as well. The Super Hornet goes for $240 standalone or $220 war bond, which is a steep buy-in for sure. Compare that with the old Mark I Super Hornet, which cost $185, and even the updated F7C Mark II cost only $175. Additionally, Super Hornet Mark II owners can, for a limited time, buy the Heartseeker upgrade for $30 or $25 war bond, which includes the Size 5 ball turret, which holds a pair of Size 4 TMSB-5 Gatlings by bearing applied technology that cannot be changed. Now, this price jump is due to the additional functionality of the ship, such as an additional gunner station, but also the Super Hornet Mark II fields more shielding and has a higher health pool than the F7C and even the F7A Mark II. Although, oddly enough, the ship is still not fully gold standard like the other Mark IIs as well, as they are all still missing their internal component bays. A criticism I had for the Mark IIs when they first released, so it looks like CIG still to this point has not finished work on these ships. Dotted with 8 maneuvering thrusters, 2 retro thrusters, and 1 large main engine, the Super Hornet's thruster layout is identical to the A and C. However, despite the similar thruster setup, the Super Hornet performs much worse both in turning and acceleration than its A and C counterparts due to its higher mass. And much like the A and C, the M is equipped with large control surfaces, ready to go when those are actually implemented in-game. Even without the control surfaces, however, performance in atmosphere is great thanks to its aerodynamic shape, making it an excellent high-performance fighter. Much like the Mark I, the Super Hornet Mark II is a 2-seater variant of the Hornet. Because of the Super Hornet's Wizzo seat, the upfront fuselage needed to be elongated to accommodate the crew. This means that the upfront displays and panels take up far more screen real estate compared to the A and C. This gives the Super Hornet a much more claustrophobic feel in the cockpit, and can even cause targets to get lost beyond the nose cone of the craft, which can put the Super Hornet at a disadvantage in a dogfight. Further reinforcing the notion that the Super Hornet is designed more as a multi-role strike fighter rather than a purebred dogfighter like the F7A and F7C. Sporting 2 Size 4 wing guns, a chin turret loaded with 2 Size 3 guns, and a dorsal mounted turret, which also features 2 Size 3 guns. The Super Hornet Mark II also features a unique turret-mounted missile battery, which houses 8 Size 1 missiles to complement its already existing 8 Size 2 missiles that are in the weapons bay. When operated solo, the turret is slaved to the pilot controls, along with the missile rack that is part of the turret. In the rear seat of the Hornet is the Weapons Systems Operator, or Wizzo, who helps by task splitting with the pilot. When occupied, they take control of the dorsal turret and its missiles, which gives the co-pilot gunner the ability to lob missiles at pursuing craft as it darts away to recharge. The Wizzo also has 2 MFDs for some additional functionality such as power management. And in an emergency, the Wizzo can even pilot the craft from the back seat, although currently the pilot does not have the ability to manually relinquish control of the craft to the Wizzo. This is an expected feature down the road in development, as CIG has hinted at this before. Now, as mentioned earlier, the Super Hornet has additional shielding in the form of an additional shield generator, giving it 3 in total. Coupled with its much higher health pool, which is just over 15,000 HP as of publishing this video, the Super Hornet is an absolute tank compared to the F7C and F7A. This can make it a veritable wrecking ball when in a head-to-head engagement. However, this added armament and protection comes at the cost of speed and maneuverability. This drawback is offset by the dedicated Wizzo, who operates the turret to attack targets the pilot is currently engaging and to fend off attackers looking to exploit its vulnerable rear. This means that both the pilot and Wizzo need to be in constant communication to ensure survival, with the pilot calling out targets and the gunner relaying information about those threats and assisting in providing DPS where it's needed. The Wizzo can also make emergency power adjustments, such as putting more power to shields to assist with recharge rates while the pilot focuses on flying and getting away from the target area. Defensively, the Super Hornet sports the same dual-launch countermeasure dispensers as its sister ships, which when programmed to launch 3 or more at a time can make it hard to hit even by EM missiles, which is the bane of its existence since it fields extra shields that also increase its signature. Regardless, the Super Hornet is a magnet for missiles, so be prepared to spam that decoy button a lot, especially in PvP. The default loadout sports 4 Panther laser repeaters and 2 Revenant ballistic Gatlings. It's actually a nice default loadout, but mono-boating lasers is still much more efficient strategy for sustained DPS since the Super Hornet has a decent laser capacitor when juicing the weapon power. Having a mixed loadout to laser down shields and combine the firepower with ballistics to finish off the targets can be a powerful combo. Just be careful of the different ballistic speeds since this can create multiple pips. This can potentially be even worse with the Heartseeker turret. With the full ballistic loadout, I was seeing up to 3 different pips due to the different ballistic velocities of each weapon. Perfectly fine for dealing with large targets, but probably not the greatest for dogfighting smaller opponents. This makes the Super Hornet very flexible, as mixed loadouts can be a good choice if you want options, and the Heartseeker turret can push the ship closer to an anti-material role, better suited for dealing with medium or even heavier targets such as heavy fighters. Now, all that being said, why does the Super Hornet bug me, pun intended, when it sounds so great in the specs? The biggest problem with the Super Hornet is its turret. It has 3 major design flaws that make the co-pilot position worthless in my opinion. The first is that the turret elevation limits are abysmal, making the tracking of targets above the craft near impossible. Now, this is probably due to size constraints, since CIG probably doesn't want the guns clipping through the hull, but this happens all the time anyway with other ships. Heck, this even happens with the Super Hornet's own chin turret, so why CIG chose this as a constraint is beyond me. The other and more severe flaw in my opinion is that the turret weapon lacks gimbal capability. For those of you not in the know, turret weapons typically are gimbaled. This gives the gunner the ability to swap gimbal modes to make target acquisition and getting rounds on target much easier during a heated engagement. And gimbal swapping in a fight is actually a requirement for effective gunnery aboard any vessel with a turret since targets can move rapidly, which necessitates the switching of modes to compensate. The lack of gimbal means that the turret operator is stuck with fixed weapons, and while this still has some generous built-in fixed assist, it is still terrible for staying trained on fast-moving targets that are side or aft of the ship, especially with a platform like the Hornet that pitches and rolls a lot faster than a typical heavy fighter. This was already a big problem going back to the original Mark I, which I was hoping that they would fix by the time they did away with the old variant, but instead they bizarrely decided to keep the same flaw in, and it's unclear if this is a design oversight or a deliberate choice. My money is on the latter since, like I said, they carried it over from the old Mark I. And this is even more baffling when you realize that the Heartseeker turret has a functional gimbal and is even pointed out in the description text, which means CIG was okay with this design choice anyway, so why they chose to make this arbitrary constraint with the base turret is beyond me. The other fatal flaw is that the capacitor for the turret is smaller than other turrets, say for example like a heavy fighter. Now this issue is not super awful since the Hornet already has a decent capacitor pool, but it's still an issue a potential buyer should be aware of nonetheless. So with those flaws laid out, it really feels that to get the most out of the Super Hornet, an owner should just run it solo, which is counter to the design ethos of force multiplying with a dedicated gunner that CIG probably wanted in the first place. Having no gimbal means that there is a lot of missed rounds on target, coupled with the smaller capacitor size that requires frequent charge cycles and the abysmal turret elevation limit. It really calls into question the effectiveness of bringing another player along for the ride. At that point, just stick that co-pilot into another ship. That will be far more effective than having them man the turret. Small side note, the turret also suffers from bad hull occlusion when shooting ahead of the ship. This can cause one or both of the guns to stop firing, which can be annoying since you need to repeatedly hammer down the trigger multiple times to get past the stoppage. CIG really needs to have some code to detect if the trigger is still being held down and if the barrel is clear so that the gun will continue to fire again without needing to press the fire button again. this would be a big quality of life plus for all ships with turrets, not just the Super Hornet. Alright, but overall, those are the main flaws. Everything else about the Super Hornet is great, and in fact, I want to give CIG props for making the Heartseeker a simple upgrade kit, which is just the turret and paint. CIG could have gone the route of creating a whole new SKU for the Heartseeker like they did with the old one, but instead they opted for this, which is much more consumer friendly, which I wholeheartedly approve. Alright, enough glazing. Where are my Warden Buck kits, CIG? Alright, jokes aside, should you get the Super Hornet Mark II? More than likely, you'll want this for the additional shielding and health, but also you want the option to bring a buddy along for the ride. In my opinion, there are much better ships for that, such as the Scorpius, which is worth the same asking price of $240, or the Hurricane, which is cheaper at $210. And those ships have a much harder hitting turret, are also tanky and fun to fly. This leaves the Super Hornet in a weird spot where half of its selling point is sort of moot, being overshadowed by other, much more fun ships to gun for. Now, in my opinion, you should not get the Super Hornet if you want the multi-crew aspect of it. There are just way better ships for that, and if you want a slower but hardier medium bruiser, well, then the ship might be for you. Just don't expect to win any rate fights against other medium and even light fighters. But if you are really into the multi-crew aspect of this fighter, then I would say I recommend you go with the Heartseeker upgrade, since the turret there at least comes with a usable gimbal. Now, if CIG makes some changes to address the shortcomings I mentioned, then this would be an absolute recommended buy from me. But until then, I would just suggest staying away if you're interested in the co-pilot stuff. Especially if you're already an F7A or F7C owner, as the sluggish performance from the Super Hornet may be a deal breaker for some, despite the higher health and shielding. Ever since Master Modes was introduced, the Hornet series has been the mainstay for players doing PvP and PvE. With its generous health and admirable firepower, the Hornet is much more forgiving for less seasoned pilots, but is also a fan favorite of PvP sweaties in equal measure. I'm still annoyed about CIG not finishing the development of this ship, with its missing component housings being a critique I had all the way back with the original F7C Mark II when it was first introduced. And I know for many of you, the idea of having no component housings is probably not that big of a deal, but remember, you're paying real money for something that is ostensibly missing part of its gameplay that is supposed to be a part of it. So just keep that in mind before you end up pulling out the wallet. But it is what it is. I can only give my feedback, and really the ball is in CIG's court here. Alright folks, that's it for me today reviewing the Super Hornet Mark II, the next generation of the classic medium fighter we all know and love. If you did indeed enjoy this video and found it informative, please leave a like, as it really does help out the channel. And of course, if you want to watch more videos like this and much more down the line, be sure to subscribe as well. And if you want to go a little bit further, consider becoming a channel member like these fine folks right here, whose contributions help me out immensely when it comes to putting videos together like this for you all. But until next time, fly safe, and I'll see you all in the black.